We're going back to a classic with this one. In a world that seems to have lost its grip on reality, you need someone to just put their foot down and say what needs to be said. Ben Shapiro is exactly the right person to do that, because you're about to watch the most satisfying takedown of a smug student making no sense on the sex versus gender debate. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this and watch the next clip before I tell you more about it.
Why do you believe you're right about trans people given the American Psychological Association, American Medical Association, American Psychoanalytic Association? I can go on for about 5 more associations that are very prominent and govern the existing like health government or health industries within like the major Western countries. And all of these associations have multiple thousands of doctors, sociologists, psychologists, and with PhDs in their respective fields backing the idea that sex and gender are different, effectively gaining the medical consensus for sex and gender being 2 different concepts, yet you have a different opinion.
Okay, so sex and gender are 2 different concepts, but gender is tied to biology. So one of the big problems that you see in sort of the argument in favor of trans rights is this notion that gender and sex are completely separable. They're not completely separable. If they are completely separable, then this means that identifying people by their subjective gender really has no relevance as to whether they are a male or a female. Male and female are biological terms. So using terminology like male and female to describe a self-perception of maleness or femaleness is sort of a bizarre way of arguing whether a thing is a man or a woman. So here's my question. It's an argument that my friend Matt Walsh likes to make. What is a woman? Define what a woman is without reference to the word woman, please.
So this is actually a logical fallacy called a red herring. You're asking me a question in order to actually challenge my question without actually answering
it really is not. I'm saying that biology, I'm agreeing with you that the notion of gender, which is effeminateness or masculinity, can be different from biology in the sense that biology is just pure male or pure female. But to suggest that there is such a thing as an effeminate male is not to suggest that an effeminate male is now a woman. Transgenderism makes the argument that if you believe that you are a woman, you are therefore a woman. Or if you believe that you are a man, you are therefore a man. I disagree with this. There are objective measures as to whether you're a man or a woman. There are objective measures as to whether you're male or female. There's certainly a spectrum with regard to effeminateness versus masculinity. That's certainly true, but that does not change the underlying sexual dichotomy that is the basis for all human reproduction.
I've honestly heard this argument before that this questioner just made, and it's never more convincing each time. The idea that places like the American Psychological Association redefining gender identity to catch up with society's gender politics is somehow an endorsement of that idea is absurd on its face. For one, referring to something like the American Psychological Association commits the logical fallacy of appealing to an authority, and even worse so is that the APA is hardly even an authority on psychology in the first place, but instead a private organization and platform for the country's psychologists to study and share their ideas. And like most areas in culture, media, and academia, it's very easy to see the APA as tainted by the same gender politics that infuse the rest of the country. In fact, let me show you the text of the actual resolution that the American Psychological Association put out a few years ago as it reclassified gender dysphoria from technically being defined as a mental illness to just an expression of someone's individuality. It reads in part, and I quote, "Gender identity refers to a person's deep-felt inherent sense of being a girl, woman, or a female, a boy, a man, or a male, a blend of male or female gender, while gender refers to the trait, characteristics, and behaviors culturally associated with one's sex assigned at birth. In some cases, gender may be distinct from the physical markers of biological sex." Notice how that definition basically introduces no new information or groundbreaking research that warrants that claim. And it's even more interesting when you look at this in the light of the APA's Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-4 in 2013. Just 10 years ago, the manual lists gender dysphoria as a condition that psychologists could diagnose, and the DSM-4 lists all of the justifications the modern trans movement gives as merely symptoms of that condition. The DSM manual lists gender dysphoria as a marked incongruence between one's experience/expressed gender and assigned gender, and speaks to its cause as clinically significant distress or impairment in social, school, or other important areas of functioning. Make of it what you will, but the idea that the APA is adapting to the changed whims of society, gender politics so rapidly without any underlying change in the scientific understanding of biology is hardly grounds to say that the questioner just did here.
Right, so this dichotomy is a false dichotomy that isn't supported by any of the medical associations that I just named off. None of the medical associations that I just named off would actually support the idea that gender is biological. This is something that's completely untrue within every single medical consensus.
Well then, I will just say that anyone who suggests that gender has no reference whatsoever to biology, it's not connected in any way to biology, is just full of shit. Because if the reason I and the reason that I
then you actually just disagree with medical consensus within the Western nation.
Yes, I disagree with the false medical consensus driven by politically driven, quote unquote, doctors. If any doctor denies to me that there is a dichotomy between male and female, a sexual dichotomy between male and female, they're ignorant and they are letting their politics get in the way of their science. Anybody who suggests to you that there is such a thing, for example, as a pregnant male is not a doctor, they are an activist.
Medical consensus on one side, that's something I've always had a hard time understanding, even from the point of view of the gender ideologues. If gender is a completely disconnected term from sex, what is it that makes any behavior or gender masculine or feminine anyway? How come it doesn't all just become a neutral mix of behaviors and appearances that point to no gender to begin with? And paradoxically, how do you believe at the same time that there are some behaviors or preferences so inherently feminine or masculine that engaging in them changes your gender category? If gender is completely separate from sex, what is it that makes playing with dolls so feminine or wearing certain clothes so gendered? If gender's separate from sex, why is there even a whole fuss about bathroom and sports debates if players can just identify the way they want where they are without having to switch places or teams? These are questions that the movement has practically never asked itself apart from people like Ben Shapiro, and maybe this next reaction points to a reason why.
I'm very glad that none of these opinions are actually accepted in academia and haven't been for over 70 years. Sent this here on Twitter.
Well, okay, so the notion that they haven't been accepted for over 70 years is a bizarre one, considering they were accepted until about 5 minutes ago. And the basic idea that male and female do not exist runs counter to all mammalian biology, all of it, not just human. Are we to suggest that gender and sex are different in walruses? How does this work exactly? Like, are they different in bears? Anytime you have all mammalian reproduction is rooted in the idea that there's a sexual dichotomy between male and female. To obscure that with all sorts of semantic word games about how you feel subjectively has no bearing on whether male and female are categories that exist. And if you're trying to define male and female with reference to any subjective category that cannot be identified by any metric whatsoever other than how you feel today, I challenge whether that is scientific or whether that is merely a self-perception that is being guided by a political agenda.
Exactly. Do you know the first known case of someone using the word gender as separate from sex dates back to the 1950s with a pretty problematic psychologist named John Money? For most of history, gender and identity have meant practically the same thing until in recent decades. And with all the changes around the term that have taken place, there's still way too many holes in the entire theory that warrant a much more honest discussion. The fact is, you may or may not agree with people like Ben or Matt on the issue, but the mere idea that they can spur on the conversation and jog the mind means bad ideas can't just steamroll opposition and rationale probing before they're implemented, and especially not when they've proven to occasionally spill over and enveloping children into these novel ideas.